Oklahoma's 2012 legislative session has now ended. As the state's economic recovery continued to gain momentum, increased revenues spurred talk about reducing state taxes. The governor made tax relief a cornerstone of her proposed budget, but finding common ground on tax cuts proved more difficult than anyone could have envisioned.
When the legislature convened in February, Governor Mary Fallin outlined her proposal calling for major cuts in the state's personal income tax, with the ultimate goal of eliminating it entirely.
So today, I am asking our lawmakers to join me in an ambitious and exciting undertaking, the passage of a bold tax reform plan that will represent the most significant tax cut in Oklahoma's history.
The governor's proposal called for cutting the state's top income tax rate from 5.25% to 3.5% beginning in 2013. Senate Appropriations Chairman Clark Jolly maintained reaching agreement on a tax cut was key to writing a state budget.
We have to solidify the tax cut plan of what exactly are we going to do, how many brackets, how much is it going to be, how much in credits, if any, are we going to get rid of. We have to get final closure on what that is because we're not going to be able to draft a budget until we know what the tax cut is.
With just over a week to go before the end of the session, legislative leaders and the governor thought they had an agreement. The plan would cut the top rate to 4.8% in 2013. It also called for eliminating the personal exemption of $1,000 per dependent for individuals who earn more than $35,000 and for couples who earn more than $70,000. But opposition mounted after an analysis by the State Tax Commission showed it would increase taxes for nearly a quarter of filers. Mickey Hepner, dean of the College of Business at the University of Central Oklahoma, said there were clearly winners and losers.
Some of the very poorest families actually will get a tax increase. So a married couple of four with two young kids making $25,000 a year, really near the poverty line, they'll actually see their taxes rise by about $50 a year as a result of this.
Senator Mike Mazie, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, insisted that analysis was flawed, since many of those low-income tax filers currently receive more in rebates than they pay in state taxes.
They actually get money from the taxpayers because of the grocery sales tax relief credit and the earned income tax credit. There's going to be a few cases where the check that they get from the taxpayers because of the change in the brackets from 7 to 3 will be slightly less.
Mazie claimed once those low-income tax filers are removed from the equation, the number of taxpayers who would either see a tax cut or no change in their tax liability would be closer to 84%. Democrats remain unanimous in their opposition to the plan. State Representative Joe Dorman questioned whether it would violate the state constitution, since the plan would increase taxes for some filers.
Any revenue bill must pass the legislature by a 3/4 vote in both bodies, and if it does not, then it goes to a vote of the people. And there's no provision in there that says, well, if it's only a certain percentage of people. And I would contend, if it's going to raise taxes on any Oklahoman, they're going to suffer that tax burden, and it should go to a vote of the people.
As opposition to the plan grew, House Republicans regrouped and unveiled a new proposal that would slash the top rate to 5% beginning in 2014 if certain revenue growth triggers are met. Speaker Chris Steele acknowledged the Tax Commission analysis was the death knell for the original agreement.
When you start modifying the current tax code and personal exemptions and deductions and itemized deductions and things of that nature, you're going to have winners and losers.
Senate President Pro Tem Brian Bingman insisted a deal was a deal, and the House was reneging on the original agreement.
They proposed a new plan, and it really kind of, surprised us that we had agreed to something, and we're certainly very disappointed in the House, and they have failed to honor the agreement that was made.
Steele insisted the House counter-proposal wasn't entirely a new plan.
We established a working group early on in session, about 11 people within our caucus. That tried to determine what was the best way to reduce taxes in the state of Oklahoma. This very much mirrors that proposal. This is a variation of that proposal. We've actually improved upon the original idea that we had, which was to lower the income tax rate and pay for it out of growth revenue.
At least part of the disagreement stemmed from the latest House plan's reliance on triggers to implement a tax cut.
We don't think that's a responsible approach to deal with uncertain and changing economic conditions over time. So that particular concept, that particular approach of theirs will not even get a hearing.
New analysis from the Tax Commission shows the first trigger in the House proposal costing the state about $120 million in fiscal year 2014. The second trigger would cost just over $152 million, and the third would be nearly $173 million. In contrast, the original agreement would cost $32.7 million in fiscal year 2013, an amount that Steele said could be held in reserve.
We're going to hold that money, and then it could be utilized to apply toward the first trigger next year, provided that the revenue projections continue to go the way that we anticipate.
Democrats question why those funds couldn't be put to use now.
We can use that to pay off the problems with the state capitol. They're asking for a bond issue to fix the Capitol building. Why not use that revenue to fix that? Let's pay our bills before we go through and cut revenue.
Senate leaders made it clear the House proposal would be dead on arrival in the Senate, and House leadership insisted the original plan would not be heard on the House floor.
Steve Bennett produced this story. Steve, what do the failures of the income tax proposals mean for the state budget?
Well, for this year, really nothing, Dick. It's just going to mean actually more money next year. $32 million had been set aside in anticipation of a tax cut. Since there hasn't been any tax cut, that means that money is going to be carried forward to be used in next year's state budget. There were some lawmakers that had wanted to use some of that funding to further fund education. They also wanted to use some money also to make some emergency repairs to the state capitol. However, House Speaker Chris Steele said it was far too late in the session to consider any such deal, and so he rejected that out of hand.
The governor had made tax cuts a big priority this year.
Yes, she did, and obviously this is a disappointment to her. She's not ready to give up. She's hoping that lawmakers will use the interim to study ways to restructure the tax code, and certainly we can expect that there's going to be additional legislation introduced next year to further reduce taxes. However, she did acknowledge on Thursday that the House and Senate were simply too far apart, and that calling a special session in an effort to get a tax cut would simply be a waste of time and money.
Steve Bennett, thanks for that report.
Thank you.